Bonjour tout le monde. Merci pour avoir venu ici à l'Hôtel de Ville de Côte-Saint-Luc pour cette conférence de presse non partisane qui ressemble à des gens qui ont contesté la carte électorale avec des hautes citoyennes et plusieurs élus de l'ouest de l'île de Montréal, le centre-ouest de l'île de Montréal. Effectivement, la contestation légale qui va être entendue l'année prochaine, qui conteste les critères pour la carte électorale québécoise, a commencé avec le changement qui était imposé, qui a jumelé les comtés de Mont-Royal et Outremont et qui a substantiellement changé Darcy-McGee. Mais ce n'est pas le but de la conférence de presse d'aujourd'hui. Aujourd'hui, on dit que tous les Québécois ont l'intérêt d'effectivement demander aux quatre chefs majeurs des partis politiques de changer les critères lesquels sont utilisés pour effectivement faire cette carte électorale québécoise. On prend espoir que les décisions légales des derniers 2 ans en Nouvelle-Écosse, Pennsylvanie et Caroline du Nord, qui a renversé les cartes électorales dans ces juridictions, peut être un modèle pour ici. Aujourd'hui, on vous laisse avec 4 messages. Les 4 chefs doivent s'engager de regarder les critères utilisés par la Commission électorale du Québec et les changer pour assurer plus d'équité entre les comtés. Deuxièmement, la carte électorale du Québec doit être basée sur les meilleures pratiques comme sont utilisées en Manitoba, Nouveau-Brunswick, Ontario et la carte fédérale qui applique dans toutes les provinces. Ce que nous disons, il y a trop de distorsions et exceptions au Québec. C'est légal au Québec d'avoir une différence de 72% des nombres des électeurs dans un comté. Selon le dernier rapport de DGEQ, le plus petit comté au Québec peut avoir 36 744 électeurs, le plus grand 61 240, c'est-à-dire une différence de 72%. Effectivement, en réalité, la plus grande différence légale qu'on a pu trouver est entre Duplessis et Arthabaska. Arthabaska a 65% des électeurs que Duplessis. Mais la carte électorale du Québec a beaucoup d'exceptions. Il y a 6 comtés qui sont beaucoup plus petits que ce que la loi permet. Et nous avons trouvé une différence entre Angava et Arthabaska de 125%. Gaspé et Bonaventure, les deux, sont presque égales à la population des comtés de Saint-Jean. Donc, pour nous, on fait appel à nos co-citoyennes québécoises. Notre lutte ici à Mont-Royal, à Outremont et Darcy-McGee, c'est la même lutte qu'ailleurs. Les grands perdants dans la carte électorale sont dans les régions. La carte électorale québécoise est fondamentalement pas démocratique. C'est difficile à expliquer que les comtés adjacents, comme les Plains et Saint-Jérôme, un nouveau comté les Plains, jusqu'à côté Saint-Jérôme, a 21 000 électeurs moins que le comté de Saint-Jérôme. Fondamentalement, ce n'est pas démocratique. Permit me to introduce the panelists and the elected officials have joined us. Premièrement, Marlene Jennings, l'ancienne ministre Marlene Jennings, qui a dû être ici aujourd'hui, avait un accident et était à l'hôpital ce soir, elle ne peut pas assister. Mais elle va mieux, j'aimerais vous assurer. À ma gauche, that's saying a lot, à ma gauche, Beryl Wiseman, qui est porte-parole pour les citoyennes qui contestent la carte électorale. À ma droite, Lawrence Bergman, ancien ministre du gouvernement du Québec, qui donne des conseils à le groupe de citoyennes qui contestent la carte électorale. À côté de M. Wiseman, M. Mitch Brownstein, le maire de la ville de Côte-Saint-Luc, qui représente le conseil de Côte-Saint-Luc aujourd'hui, qui a adopté une motion en contestation de la carte électorale. À côté de M. Brownstein, à son gauche, M. William Steinberg, le maire de Hampstead. La ville de Hampstead a également adopté une motion en contestation de la carte électorale. Le conseiller Jack Edery de la ville de Hampstead, qui est une des plaignants dans la contestation de la carte électorale. À son côté, Mme Michelle Saint-Luc, et m'excuse si je ne le prononce pas bien, conseillère municipale de la ville de Mont-Royal, un des 2 représentants aujourd'hui de la maire Philippe Roy. La ville Montréal également adopté une résolution contestait la carte électorale. La conseillère Dida Burkou de la ville de Côte-Saint-Luc, la conseillère Mitch Kujawski de la ville de Côte-Saint-Luc, à ma droite extrême, la conseillère Erin Kennedy de la ville de Montréal, l'autre conseiller qui représente le maire Philippe Roy aujourd'hui, la conseillère Ruth Kovacs de la ville de Côte-Saint-Luc et le maire Benny Masada, le maire de Montréal-Ouest. À côté de moi, je pense que j'ai déjà mentionné Lawrence. Aussi, j'aimerais indiquer dans la salle, il y a beaucoup de leaders des communautés culturelles qui représentent leur communauté aujourd'hui. I want to note the presence of many leaders of the Filipino community, the South Asian community, the Jewish Hasidic community, and others who are involved in the electoral map contestation and who wanted to be here today to show their ongoing support for what we're doing. Just to quickly recap in English, we have 4 messages today. This is a nonpartisan press conference. We say the following. We are writing to the 4 party leaders. We want them to pronounce themselves during the election campaign. We say that the Quebec electoral map is fundamentally undemocratic. The distortions in the electoral map are the most of any province in Canada. There are counties that are legally 65% smaller than the largest counties. We want best practices such as are used in Manitoba and New Brunswick and the federal election map for Quebec, Ontario, and elsewhere to become the criteria for Quebec. We no longer want to live a situation where you have 2 counties like Gaspé and Bonaventure being just slightly larger than Saint-Jean. We say that these distortions don't only affect us in West End Montreal, they affect Quebecers right through the province, that some regions have less political weight and political clout, and there is no reason for a county like Arthabaska or Saint-Jean or Saint-François to be near the maximum number of voters, while not only are there many small ridings, there are 6 that don't get any protection in the law, but are legally allowed to exist by the Electoral Commission. I'm going to ask Mr. Beryl Wiseman to speak on behalf of the citizens contesting the electoral map.
Good morning, chers collègues, citoyennes, citoyennes. Marvin a couvert beaucoup des points techniques. Je viens de la France, mais il a parlé beaucoup en français. Let me say these words in English. Sometimes in activism and in politics, many things are gray. This has been a fight. It's been a long fight. It's going to continue, and we're going to win because this is black and white. We pride ourselves in Canada. We pride ourselves in Quebec that we don't do things like other countries, like the United States, and voter suppression. This is institutionalized voter suppression. We have nothing to comfort ourselves with. Political parties have mouthed very nice platitudes during this election, not wanting minority communities to be forgotten. How could we not be forgotten when we have lost a voice in the National Assembly? What is the point of government making a law for the Métropole de Montréal et couper la vote et la voix des Montréalais, des tout Montréalais, pas seulement les non-francophones? If anything can be said to be wrong, it is that a person's vote is not equal. It violates the Canadian Charter of Rights. It violates our own Quebec Charter of Rights. Our Quebec Charter calls for une égalité et une équité de vote de chaque citoyen. How is that possible? When in the riding that we lost of Mount Royal, we now have 2 super ridings of nearly 60,000 citizens, where before we had 3 ridings of 42,000 citizens with overworked MNAs anyway. How is it possible to have équité de vote? How is it possible to have an expression of our concerns, be they poverty, be they culture, when les comtés dans la région avaient une moyenne de 38 000 électeurs et les comtés urbains avaient une moyenne de 54 000? We don't have a just system in Quebec. It needs to stop. And if there is one thing that all the party leaders can do for the legacy of this province to make it a just society, is to give equality of voting rights to all citizens of Quebec. Chacune des chefs de chaque parti parle que nous sommes tous Québécois et Québécoises. Ce n'est pas une question de langue, ce n'est pas une question de sang ou de culture. Let them prove it. let them give us all an equal vote. Thank you.
Before I give the floor to Lawrence, I want to mention that your press kits have a portrait of the 6 largest ridings in Quebec, the 6 legally smallest ridings in Quebec, and 6 more that exist, not based on law. They're even smaller than the legal minimum. They just exist, showing you the difference. You also have in your press kit the list of all 77 federal ridings in Quebec with their population, and you will see that there's far less distortion on the federal map in Quebec than there is in the provincial map. Je donne la parole à Lawrence Bergman.
Thank you, Marvin. Thank you for being here, ladies and gentlemen. I want to stress that this is a non-partisan undertaking on my behalf and on behalf of the committee in front of you. Our goal is to ensure that the democratic principle of effective representation becomes a reality. Now it's only be given lip service. In the Supreme Court Carter case, they say very clearly, without effective representation, on court le risque d'offrir une représentation inadéquate aux citoyens dont le vote a été affaibli. Conséquence, une représentation inégale et non équitable. MNAs represent people, not trees and not land. They are elected by voters, not by rural areas, not by cities, and not by economic interests. The right to elect an MNA in a fair and equitable manner is the bedrock of democracy. It's the bedrock of our political system. We must not give the votes of citizens in one area of the province more weight than the votes of citizens in another part of the province. You know that the average or the median, if you take the total number of electors and divide by 125, it comes out to 48,892 voters that should be in every riding across the province. Imagine the legal gap, because now the law says you can go above or below 25%. The legal gap, Arthabaska has 60,338 voters, and Duplessis, 37,707 voters. A difference of 23,631 voters. The law doesn't allow, but it does, we are faced now with 6 ridings which have become exceptions. You have the riding of Ungava, which only has 27,501 voters, which is 33,837 voters less than Arthabaska, a difference of 125%. Weighing the votes because of where you happen to live is not justifiable. We are therefore announcing that we're sending letters tomorrow to all 4 major party leaders containing our reasoning and also requesting a short meeting with each of the party leaders and asking that if they are elected, that they commit to reform the criteria used to draw up the Quebec electoral map, which has now unjustifiable deviations, as I mentioned, allowing a plus or minus 25% of electors over and above the average, and plus permitting, as I mentioned, 6 ridings of exception below the 25%. The 6 ridings are in Gava, which is at 43.9%, Gaspé, 38.6, Rainier-Lévesque, 31.9, Abitibi East, 31, Abitibi West, 27.9, and Bonaventure, 27.2. We must also remember, if you compare the plus or minus 25% that I mentioned, the Manitoba electoral law only permits plus or minus 10% over the average or below the average. New Brunswick, plus or minus 15%. If you take a look at the federal map, this is probably the most equitable of all the maps, the electoral maps. So it's doable, dear friends, it's doable. In conclusion, I hope that each of the four party leaders will agree to a short meeting with us and will positively react to our letter in the name of democracy. In the name of democracy, I ask them to meet with us and then to take a position which is equitable, justifiable, and we have effective representation in our electoral law. Thank you.
Merci, Laurent. Before I go to the maire of Côte-Saint-Luc, j'aimerais reconnaître dans la salle M. Cocoon Manourouzaman, commissaire scolaire de la Commission scolaire de Montréal pour Côte-Neige, qui est en solidarité avec nous autres aujourd'hui. As well, I'd like to just briefly note that many of the leaders of the ethnic communities are here today. Mr. Cesar Manuel for FAMAS, the main organization of the Filipino community, Ms. Lilia Esguerra from FILGA, the Filipino seniors, Bert Abiera for the Philippine Heritage Committee, Bashir Hussein from the South Asian Alliance, Meyer Fag representing the Hasidic Jewish community, which is split in two by the decision to join Mount Royal with Uchma, Miriam Cohen from the Creative Social Center, Reverend Joel Copetiers, and other community leaders. I welcome your presence here.
Could I just mention that Jennifer Crane just walked in, and she's probably been an activist in the largest minority community, and that's the English community, and she's been an activist for English rights for a long time. So
thank you.
Missed the beginning of the conference.
Thank you. I'm going to pass the parole to Mitch Brownstein, le maire de Côte-Saint-Luc. La ville de Côte-Saint-Luc était partie de la contestation de la carte électorale de la première plainte. Ils étaient là en 2015 quand la première proposition a été faite. Ils ont adopté une motion et quand le deuxième rapport est renversé, après que nous avons déjà gagné la cause dans notre partie de la ville de Montréal, la ville de Côte-Saint-Luc a réagi avec une deuxième motion. Je donne la parole au maire Brownstein.
Merci Marvin. C'est un très grand plaisir d'avoir cette réunion ici à Côte-Saint-Luc avec les élus présents et passés et tous les activistes qui sont ici. And certainly from the city of Côte-Saint-Luc, it's very important to us. We have four of the councillors here, Councillor Burku, Councillor Kovac, Councillor Kajaski, Councillor Torgman, representing half of our council. You know, this is something that's very close to the heart of the residents of Côte-Saint-Luc. We represent two minority communities, both the Jewish community, the English community, which were minority communities in Quebec. And losing a representative is losing a voice. Having a riding that is so much larger diminishes our rights and our strength at getting issues that are important to our communities to move forward. So we did pass a resolution, as was mentioned, back in January of 2016, and we talk about many different things in the resolution. I'm not going to repeat all the things that were discussed already, but I will highlight a few. So on the island of Montreal, there's over 1 million people, and the English community is representing about 20% of that community. In the adoption and the change of this resolution, we have things that are happening in these ridings, such as the Blue Bonnets residential project at the Triangle, and other developments that are bringing more people into these ridings, making them even more dense, continuing to diminish our ability to affect change. We donated $7,000 on behalf of the city of Côte-Saint-Luc, and we're matching donations from residents in order to support the legal challenge. Julius Gray is the lawyer that's representing in the legal challenge, and in addition to having the representatives of each party commit to a position, we need to continue this fight in the court. we feel that we're going to win, but there's always money that's involved. So we've sent a letter out, and we're going to send that letter again, Donate to Challenge in Quebec, which basically is asking residents of Côte Saint-Luc to commit to supporting this cause. And hopefully with the financial support that's needed, not only from Côte Saint-Luc, but from all communities, we will have the financial support and we will win this issue in the courts. So I want to thank you all for being here today. And the City of Côte Saint-Luc is behind this, working with all the members at this table and all of you that have come out to support us today. Now, I guess we'll pass right over to Bill. Bill, you want to do it?
The next speaker, before I go to the question period, is Bill Steinberg, the maire of Hampstead. Comme je viens de dire avant, Hampstead a également adopté deux motions, une contre la première proposition d'IGQ en 2015, et puis en 2017, quand ils ont entériné une carte qui, effectivement, voit la disparition d'un comté dans notre partie de la ville, une deuxième motion, et Hampstead est une partie de la contestation légale également. Monsieur Steinberg.
One of the advantages or disadvantages of speaking last is I don't have to say very much. Just about everything's already been said. But I do want to make just a couple of points. Hampstead, of course, is fully behind this. I wrote a op-ed piece on this subject in the Gazette back in March. Our council passed a resolution. We've probably raised more money per capita for the court case than anyone else. So we're very, very much behind this because it's a fundamental principle of democracy. Every vote should be equal. That's been mentioned before. It's also been mentioned that this hurts minorities, and I want to highlight that for a second. It would be bad enough if you just had this ridiculous plus or minus 25% with 6 ridings that are even worse than that, and with yet another one that is by law another exception with about 11,000 voters and they get an M&A. That would be bad enough. But the fact is that the larger ridings tend to be the rural ridings, and the smaller ridings are the urban ridings. And it is in the urban ridings where you find minorities, minority language, Anglophones, ethnic minorities of all types, the minority religions. All of these are in the urban ridings. So not only does this system have unequal vote weight, it also discriminates against all those different minority groups. And that, of course, in my opinion anyway, is certainly against the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And that's why I have every confidence that at the end of the day, we will win this court case. But even better would be if the political leaders of the 4 parties, as soon as they get elected, they get together and they unanimously adopt a new map, no more than plus or minus 10%, like they do in Manitoba and New Brunswick. In the case of Manitoba, it may be plus or minus 10%, but they've managed that I think only 2 ridings differ by more than 5%. And Manitoba has the same vast ridings, big areas. They can do it. We can do it in Quebec too. So I hope the leaders will be democratic. I hope they'll come out and state very strongly that after the election, they will all support a much fairer electoral map. Thank you very much.
What happened to the wireless world?
Comme vous savez, j'étais ancien professeur de l'école secondaire, donc avant que je ouvre pour la période de questions, je vais répéter les 4 points que je pense c'est important de retenir. 1, nous demandons une réponse des 4 chefs des partis pendant la campagne électorale s'ils sont ouverts à une réforme des critères utilisés pour la carte électorale. 2, on veut effectivement qu'ils regardent les meilleures pratiques. Et pour nous, les meilleures pratiques sont Manitoba, Nouveau-Brunswick et les critères utilisés pour la carte fédérale. Troisièmement, les grands perdants dans la carte actuelle n'est pas seulement nous autres ici dans l'ouest de Montréal, c'est dans les régions. Pourquoi les gens à Saint-François ou Saint-Jérôme doit avoir beaucoup plus des électeurs, presque 60 000, quand les comtés avoisinant à moins que 39 000. Donc, la question s'impose. Comment est-ce qu'on peut proposer un découpage avec ces grandes distorsions? Et finalement, pour répondre à l'argument qui est mis de l'avance, parfois que les zones rurales ont besoin de plus de représentation parce qu'ils sont éloignés, je cite un paragraphe dans notre communiqué. Le courriel, les téléphones cellulaires et Skype ont fait disparaître l'époque où les régions rurales éloignées pouvaient faire valoir la légitimité de compter moins d'électeurs par circonscription que les circonscriptions urbaines. La technologie a rendu cet argument caduque. Cette citation est celle de M. Wiseman, le second co-porte-parole du groupe de citoyennes qui conteste la carte. I'll just quickly repeat that in English and then we'll go to questions. Our main points are the following. We are challenging the four party leaders to give us an answer during the election campaign. And that's what election campaigns are for. And our question is, do you support fairer criteria for the election map in Quebec? There are too many distortions rendering our current electoral map undemocratic. There is no excuse for some counties having half the number of voters than others. And if it was one or two exceptions, you might make an argument. But since it happens right through the map, it causes fair-minded people everywhere to ask questions. Number two, we are asking the party leaders, will you look at the criteria used by Manitoba, New Brunswick, and the federal government to draw its map, including in Quebec, which apparently has fairer criteria and less distortion between districts. Number three, we are saying that the losers in the Quebec electoral map aren't just us here in Mount Royal, Outremont, Darcy-McGee, but in many of the regions of Quebec. There is no reason why some rural areas should have twice the representation of others. You add Gaspé and Bonaventure, you get a county that's just about the same size as Arthabaska or Saint-Jean or Richmond or Papineau or Verchères or Saint-Jérôme, and that's wrong. Finally, to answer the argument that you sometimes hear that rural areas should have more representation because they're far away and there's big distance between towns, email, cell phones, and Skype has made the argument from a different era that remote rural regions should have more representation, basically a non-argument these days. And that's attributable to Mr. Wiseman here in the communiqué in the English and French version. J'ouvre la période des questions. Questions en français? Sarah? Beaucoup plus fort. Okay. Pour nous autres, c'est clair, on ne va pas dire à la Commission électorale comment faire le découpage. Ce que nous demandons est que l'Assemblée nationale du Québec revoie les critères actuels et la grande discrétion qui est donnée aux commissions électorales et au directeur général des élections du Québec. On veut effectivement, notre préférence est que le modèle de Manitoba soit utilisé, qui permette les comtés d'avoir une moyenne et ne pas être plus que 10% ou moins de 10% en nombre des électeurs. Nouveau-Brunswick est presque pareil, c'est plus ou moins 15%, mais il essaie de faire le plus possible à 10% des différences. Le 15% est pour accommoder des minorités linguistiques, pour donner des Acadiens plus de représentation dans la législature de Nouveau-Brunswick. Mais c'est clair que les gens raisonnables partout au Québec, francophones, anglophones, allophones, habitent en région, habitent sur l'île de Montréal, peuvent dire c'est un non-sens complet d'avoir beaucoup des comtés qui ont 58 000, 59 000, 60 000 électeurs, presque au maximum permis. Et il y a des autres comtés qui sont légaux, 37 000, 38 000, 39 000. Il n'y a pas un ou deux. Il y a presque 40 qui sont moins grands que Outremont, si on n'a pas changé Outremont, qui avait, à l'époque, l'électeur général a jumelé ça avec Montréal, Outremont était à 44 000 électeurs. Donc, effectivement, notre message est clair. La carte électorale actuelle réside trop sur la discrétion. Il y a trop de distorsions, déviations, et le modèle ailleurs au Canada est beaucoup plus démocratique. Regarde les chiffres dans votre pochette pour les comtés fédéraux au Québec. Ils sont pas pareils, mais beaucoup plus proches une à l'autre que la carte québécoise pour les élections provinciales. Okay. J'ai des problèmes auditoires. OK. Nous avons lancé un recours légal qui est déposé, je pense, en mai dernier. Nous avons été devant un juge, mais l'audition va être en 2019, après l'élection actuelle. On continue avec la contestation parce que c'est important d'avoir jurisprudence. Mais on a des espoirs parce que dans les derniers 2 ans, dans Nouvelle-Écosse, le cour a donné raison aux plaignants et invalidé partiellement la carte de Nouvelle-Écosse. Et dans les États-Unis, nous prenons connaissance des cas à Pennsylvanie et Caroline du Nord où les courts ont renversé l'ensemble des cartes utilisées pour l'élection fédérale pour la Chambre des représentants à Washington pour ces 2 États. Pour nous, on pense que nos arguments sont forts, mais étant donné qu'on ne va pas être écouté pour nos 6 mois, le jugement peut être 1 an de maintenant, on profite de l'élection provinciale. On pense qu'effectivement, on fait appel à tous les Québécois pour solidarité. Je ne pense pas que les gens veulent les distorsions que nous avons au Québec. Comment a dit aux gens dans le comté de Richmond qui, Megantic a 21 22 000 moins des électeurs que eux, comment a dit aux mêmes gens que, le comté de René-Lévesque a presque 29 000 électeurs moins qu'eux. C'est-à-dire de valoriser le vote dans un comté. C'est prendre 2 votes dans beaucoup des comtés dans les régions pour faire égal à des autres comtés ruraux. Et ça doit changer.
Est-ce que je peux juste ajouter un commentaire, parce que Sarah, vous avez demandé une question, une partie de votre question qui est très importante d'adresser. Vous avez demandé au début les faits ou les nécessités ou les besoins pour Montréal, mais ce n'est pas seulement pour Montréal. Nous sommes, comme j'ai dit dans mes commentaires, nous à Québec, au Canada, nous sommes toujours très fiers que nous sommes mieux que les Américains dans la question de suppression des votes. Mais quand nous avons parlé dans les chambres, dans les coulisses de pouvoir avec les politiciens, ils toujours disent, mais vous savez, c'est très difficile de changer les comtés parce que nous devons respecter les régions. Bon, la même excuse que nous avons écoutée dans les États-Unis, pourquoi une femme comme elle, Hillary Clinton, a gagné 3 millions plus de votes, et pourquoi nous avons un collège électoral pour respecter les régions, mais nous avons une solution très, très facile pour ça. Bon, tu veux respecter les régions? Nous comprenons. Mais si vous avez un moyen de 38 000 électeurs dans les régions, faites la même chose dans les villes. Coupez les comtés. Et la réponse est toujours des politiciens, mais chacun de chaque parti, face à moi. Ah, mais nous n'avons pas jamais pensé de couper les comtés. Notre conseiller politique tout le temps dit fusionner. Je dis, mais pourquoi fusionner? Ah, parce que nous avons une loi qui dit nous ne pouvons pas avoir plus de 125 membres de l'Assemblée nationale. Je dis, mais ça, c'est une nouvelle loi. Ça, c'est une loi qui a 15 ans, 20 ans. Et une loi peut changer. Quand le démographique change le numéro. Fait 140 représentatifs. Ça, c'est le point. Et votre point, c'est exactement le problème que nous avons maintenant à Québec.
Mathias? Non, ça va. Autre question en français? S'il n'y a pas, we're going to go to questions. M'excuse, Sarah. Oui. Oui, tout ça est dans le rapport de DGEQ. Je vais vous envoyer par courriel après la conférence de presse le rapport.
Elle avait une question claire. Nous avons, avant l'échange, Darcy McGee, Montréal. Vendredi, nous avons la funéraire de John Chiacha, un des plus importants députés dans l'histoire de Québec, qui était le député pour Montréal, qui représentait et comprenait les besoins des communautés culturelles. Et ça, c'est pourquoi il a réussi dans la crise d'Oka. Mais en tout cas, Darcy McGee, Montréal et Outremont avaient plus ou moins 42 000 à 43 000 électeurs. Aujourd'hui, Darcy McGee, 59 000, Outremont-Montréal, 58 000, avec, par hasard, des populations les plus faibles et vulnérables économiques sur l'île de Montréal, avec l'exception de Hochelaga Maisonneuve. C'est-à-dire le 38 000 personnes à Côte-de-Neige, dans l'ancien comté de Montréal, qui vivent sous la ligne de pauvreté, dans un système au Canada qui est le plus pire dans le G7, dans la sécurité sociale pour les aînés. Nous sommes le seul pays qui garde les pauvres, les aînés particulièrement, 9 000 sur la ligne de pauvreté, n'avaient pas une voix. C'est-à-dire que Québec a coupé la représentation des plus vulnérables. Et comment un député qui avait des problèmes avec 43 000 électeurs dans les anciens côtés peut représenter maintenant 58 000 électeurs avec toutes les différences. Vous savez que dans l'ancien côté de Montréal, nous dépensons l'argent pas seulement sur les villes, mais sur les communautés culturelles. Où est le sens dans un comté comme Montréal? Je finis sur ce point. Le comté de Montréal avait plus de communautés culturelles qui avaient recognition par le gouvernement de Québec que tous les autres comtés à Québec. Avec une main, le gouvernement de Québec et le gouvernement du Canada parlent un bon jeu pour les communautés culturelles, donnent l'argent, et à l'autre main, il dit « Prends notre argent, mais oublie votre vote ». Franchement.
Sarah, avant que je vais en anglais, il y a un autre élément. Le comté lequel fait référence M. Wiseman a beaucoup de non-citoyennes. Donc, les députés de ces deux comtés ne vont pas avoir presque le maximum nombre des électeurs. Il va avoir un autre 20 000 personnes dans leur comté qui ne sont pas citoyennes. Donc, il va représenter, comparément avec des petits comtés où presque tout le monde est un citoyen, 2,5 fois plus de personnes. Questions in English. Rob?
Thank you, Rob, because that's been essential, and it's something that even before we started this, I've been talking to politicians about. As an activist, as president of the Institute of Public Affairs, as much as an editor, and I make no apologies for being an activist journalist, I ask them all the time, going back to the time of Mr. Charest, we have to equalize this system. What is the problem here? And I'm always given this answer. We have to respect the traditions of the regions. It's the same answer that the Americans gave in the Electoral College. I just want to repeat what I said to Sarah, that, well, yes, Hillary Clinton got 3 million more votes, but lost because the Electoral College protects the interest of the rural areas. But that's a choice of the people where they live. So I say to all of them, but nobody wants to touch the regions. Yes, as Marvin said, we have to clarify those 6 ridings that are insanely low in population. But you want to leave the regions at their average of 38,000? Great. Cut the urban ridings to reflect that, plus ou moins 10%, more or less 10%, which is the norm. How can we call Quebec a truly democratic jurisdiction where Section 10 of our charter, the Quebec Charter, says égalité de vote est primordiale, the equality and equity of our vote is primordial? How can we have that if it takes, as Marvin says, 1.5 votes in an urban area? Just cut the ridings. So the answer came back from all leaders, all parties over the years. Yes, but we have a law that says 125 seats is the maximum in the Assembly. I said, but that's a new law. Change the law. You have a majority government. We've had majority governments for, correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, 12 of the past 15 years. Raise the ceiling to 140 seats. It's a matter of political will and courage.
The cities?
Your citizens, did the people, your voters, your electors, did they ever tell you that they felt that they didn't have a big voice in comparison to me as the people from Atlantic or some of the other regions?
You have to remember the basic question of representation is when you have a person in Quebec City sitting in the Assembly, in a caucus, in a cabinet, he usually and certainly will speak for his constituency, for the people who sent him there. I've sat in caucuses for 20 years. People stand up in caucus and plead for their parish. If you have less people pleading for the parish, you have less results for the parish. if you take a look at the representation on the island of Montreal in the last few maps, it's decreased map by map. We have lost now a valuable seat in the city of Montreal, a valuable voice in any one of the caucuses, in the Assembly, and certainly in Cabinet. Unconscionable. So that, the people certainly will feel it. If now instead of Darcy McGee having 44,000 people represented by their M&A, have close to 60,000. As Marvin mentioned also, rural ridings, especially Montreal, you have many people who are not voters, who, when they come into your office, you treat them like a voter. There's not two classes of people walking into your riding. So the Montreal M&A could be representing 80,000 people. The unfairness is incredible, but it's always important to remember, a voice in Quebec City is a voice for the people of the riding, the ethnic communities, the area, and I've seen it time and again when it comes up, and when there's a severe question for Montreal, it's the Montreal M&As who stand up. And so there's a struggle, naturally, in a caucus between Montreal and rural, etc. And somehow you come to an understanding, because in a caucus you never vote. But you come to an equitable understanding. But if there's less people representing an island or a part of the province, less M&As, certainly the results will show it.
So you believe that if this change were to happen, this would give a lot more power to Montreal?
I'm talking about equitable power to Montreal. Equitable power. Go back in the last few maps, we've lost seats, 4 seats. That's 4 voices who will not be standing up in a caucus, in the Assembly, and in Cabinet, a choice of ministers. 4 less possibilities of a minister being chosen from Montreal.
Before I give it to Tim, Rob, it's impossible to have a map where every seat is going to be exactly the same number of voters. Geography sometimes intervenes, cuts neighborhoods, etc. But however, best practices, like they use in Manitoba, make sure the seats are relatively the same. And you have 2 choices. Either you have more elected officials in the National Assembly, and I'm not sure there's a consensus on that, or there's going to be winners or losers by having fairer criteria. What it will mean is there are going to be winners both in Montreal and in the countryside, because many of the regional ridings are being penalized as well. And others will have to give up the privileges that they've had that made them overrepresented for decades in the National Assembly. Tim.
Who's most at risk of making these changes to the electoral map? Among the elected voters, who's most at risk?
Well, let's start off with, there are 7 ridings in Quebec, not 6, but 7, that are below the norm. One of them is protected by law and has been since 1895, and that's Île-de-la-Madeleine. It has only 10,600 voters. And they got that right because they were so far from the rest of Quebec in a different time zone at a time it was impossible to get to the rest of Quebec. That's changed. The federal government has long ago decided they don't get particularly special representation. They've been fused with Gaspé federally, but they continue to enjoy special status provincially. We're not making that demand. That will come up eventually. But there are 6 counties right now that are below the legal limit. They're not protected by law. It was a decision of the Director General of Elections. We're putting into question those 6 ridings. Who would win? The winners would be the large counties. Any county more than 55,000 voters, and there are about 40 of them, would find that they would go down in the number of voters, and those that are between 37 and 42,000 would go up, and there are about 40 of them as well. You would end up with a fairer electoral map. On the island of Montreal, most ridings would be winners, some would not. In our particular struggle in our part of town, we had a huge Filipino community. That's why there's so many people from the Filipino community here today. Most of them were in Mount Royal, where they could have influence on the M&A, and did. The new boundaries cuts them in half. They're still there living in the neighborhood, But half of them are now in Mount Royal, Outremont, half are in Darcy-McGee. They're still major communities, but they have less voice and less influence. I'm sure the MNAs are going to be elected will, of course, work with the community. That's not the point. But however, in terms of political clout, they are weaker than they were before. And the same thing happened with the Hasidic community in Outremont, a large part of which has been now shifted to Mercier, while the rest remains in Outremont. Their political weight is diluted as well. So if we had fairer criteria, if we use the Manitoba model, we would find we'd probably get an extra riding on the island of Montreal, and the number of voters and the existing ridings would go down. Many of these ethnic communities, natural communities, would be, again, in the same ridings.
Why do you think it's going this way? Why do you think the map is changing the way that's deviating away from what the Manitoba model? Why do you think it's going this direction?
We believe that there's too much discretion in the law for the Electoral Commission. And in this particular case, for us, we feel really hard done by. We played the legal game. In 2015, they proposed to take away a riding on the island of Montreal, one of ours. We all said no. We went to the public hearings. We made our case. And in February 2017, they said, you're right, you're getting your riding back, but we're taking one away elsewhere on the island of Montreal. There was political protest because that riding, Saint-Marie, Saint-Jacques, a lot of people came forward and they flip-flopped 2 weeks ago, which 2 weeks later, which made us think that the Quebec Electoral Commission is not a nonpartisan independent body, but is susceptible to political pressure. Now, we'll find that out when we go to court, but that's our analysis of the situation. They came out with going back to what they said in 2015. So we lost our riding. But we're here not just for Mount Royal, Outremont, and Darcy-McGee. We're here for all of Quebec. We want to form alliances with people who live in the regions. If you live in Saint-François near Sherbrooke, if you live in Arthabaska, you have the same problem that we do. You have a huge riding. Why should you be over 60,000 voters in Saint-Jean when people a few miles away have a riding with 39,000? Doesn't make sense to us. And we're thinking that you can benefit as much as we would if we had fairer criteria.
I think it's important to add to Tim's question. You asked the question of why. It's up to all of us, and here, it's up to all of us to be activists in the media and just point out the obvious. Marvin talked about Saint-Marie Saint-Jacques. I congratulated Madame Massé. She did what a representative had to do. She went into the streets and said, la communauté gay besoin leur propre voix. The gay community needs its own voice. As we've been saying, the poor, the cultural communities need their own voice. The English community needs more voices. You asked who was going to benefit. Well, my God, if we cut the urban ridings to the size of the regions, everybody would benefit. The poor, the vulnerable, they would be closer to their MNAs. The traditional Anglophone communities, plus the cultural communities. Just another 20 ridings would accomplish that. And furthermore, the media has to ask the question. This isn't just an elimination of a riding. It is clear in the timeline. The DGEQ actually came out, as Marvin said, with a communiqué de presse saying, we're cutting out Saint-Marie Saint-Jacques. That was a wrong decision. They're merging Westmount St. Louis. They actually said, we're making Westmount St. Louis disappear. But remember another thing they did, for no reason at all, over the opposition of Guy Ouellet, the MNA of Chambéry, open opposition in the press, over the opposition of Monique Sauvé, the MNA for Fabre, the DGEQ, for some ungodly reason, cut the Greek community in the riding of Chambéry by half, over the objections of Greek leaders, over the objections of the MNAs. There was no reason for it. They just did it. And the law they're violating is that it is the Charter of Quebec, the Charter of the Rights and Freedoms of Quebec that says, and it's reflected in the deontology of the DGEQ, you must respect natural communities. So after 50 years, they just make a move to cut the Greek community and Chambéry in half over the objections of MNAs, community leaders, and everybody else. Ask the questions. We all should be asking the questions.
Les dernières deux questions, last two questions, Emily Campbell and Matthias. Emily, puis Matthias. And then we'll do a scrum with the ethnic media. The basic principle of our entire society is based on one person, one vote, and the equality of a vote. You cannot accept a situation where many, many regions of the province, many counties, have almost double the number of voters of other counties. If there was an argument to be made for a couple of exceptions, it doesn't appear in this map because this map has many counties near the maximum, many near the minimum, and then the other 7 I mentioned below the minimum. And that below the minimum is justified by law for only one, Ile de la Madeleine. The other 6 was a decision based on purely the discretion of the Electoral Commission. Now, if I lived in Papineau, which is towards the Ottawa area, and I discovered I had, in my county, according to the DGEQ on September 30th, 2016, 59,336 voters there, and just over, here's another county, I'm just picking one at random, Portneuf, 42,225, Rousseau, 40,721, Rennie-Lévesque, 33,563. I'd say, how come there's 80% fewer voters in some of those counties than in my county? Why is my voice less meaningful in the National Assembly? And clearly, another principle in the Charter of Rights is minority representation. The reason part of the Nova Scotia electoral map was overturned was the counties that were drawn diminished Francophone minority representation in the Nova Scotia legislature. And that's why the court said, you have a charter obligation. We're making the same argument, by the way, in our contestation for our region. So I don't want to presume bad faith on the part of anybody who's elected. But however, the whole principle of democratic society is based on our votes being relatively equal.
But not presuming bad faith, there is detrimental representation. It's natural. If you only have X people, 31 MNAs on the Isle of Montreal, you get less representation for different cultural communities. It's not, nobody's being in bad faith, but it certainly will be, at the end of the day, detrimental representation.
Now, Emily asked a very important question, but it should be in reverse. It's not, you asked a question about why is this being done and how the rural areas are being affected. The question is not that. The question is, why has there not been, the DGEQ has to look at the electoral map every time there's a census. So it's done every 10 years. So how is it that they're not looking at the fact that Quebecers are making a choice to be more urban? Why are they cutting urban ridings? You can draw whatever conclusion you want, and it's not a question of bad faith. But clearly, when you see that the traditional rural regions have not been cut substantially in their seats, but the urban ones are not only being cut, but the movement of the population is not being reflected, then we have a legitimate policy question. And the DGEQ being supposedly immune from political, and I use that in the best sense of the word, political as in everybody here is political, being immune from political representation about what people need maybe has to change.
Let me give you 3 quick examples. Public transportation and where we invest. We invest in auto routes versus public transportation and what type of transportation. Minority linguistic rights and multiculturalism. And every healthcare dollar. Where do we spend it? Those things are decided by the votes of the National Assembly. When certain areas are overrepresented, without being in bad faith, there's a natural tendency to favor your own region because you know what your needs are better than you know what the needs of the other guy are. Matthias, mot de la fin.
I'll give you some breaking...
Hold on.
Let me give you some breaking news, Emily, to all of you, okay? We're running this. I'm going to give you breaking news. To your point, the Cavendish region in the health ministry was promised 4 doctors, 4 family doctors. Cavendish region is one of the 15 worst regions of the 93 in Quebec in the health system in registering people for family doctors. Barrette said, we want everybody registered, we want 85% registered. Cavendish, which is NDG, Montreal West, Côte Saint-Luc, has 18,900 people unregistered. They just got a new directive from Ministère de Soins de Santé. They're not getting 4. They're getting 1. And they have 4 doctors retiring. And who the hell do we have speaking for us but 2 people with super ridings?
Every municipality requires on provincial money and grants. You have less representation, you're not going to get the money you need to build infrastructure. That's key.
Mathias, mot de la fin.
Je comprends l'idée du déséquilibre entre circonscriptions. Donc, peut-être, c'est la représentation. I think you earn one minister responsible for English-speaking communities in the caucus.
Et nous besoin pas un ministre. Nous besoin que le caucus en total comprenne que chaque personne est québécois et québécoise.
Il y a quand même eu une sorte de compensation en obtenant un ministre. Je me fais l'avocat du diable.
Oui, une compensation pour la perte d'une vote. Je préfère la souveraineté de mon suffrage que d'avoir un ministre, n'est-ce pas?
Merci tout le monde. The ethnic media, if you would like to do an interview with anybody at the table, I urge you to do so. Everybody is available. Merci à tout le monde pour avoir venu ce matin. Thank you, everybody, for having come this morning.